I'm down to take weekend. Oh yeah, I have to show you something actually. Something that's been bugging me for years. You guys see this? I don't know if it's showing up at all. You see this Rubik's Cube here?
Compression
Yeah.
is like murdering
Oh, we can
quality
see
for
it.
me.
It says Emil.
Oh yeah, it does actually. But this Rubik's Cube here, it has like an edge that's white, and then it's white on the top as well. So it's like a white corner.
Yeah, it's currently black and white for us, so
Okay, yeah. Okay,
a
it's telling
bit
you
hard to see.
It's a white corner, and that doesn't work. You can't do that on a Rubik's Cube. So it's been bugging me for years.
You can
Yeah.
do that if you're Kenny Starfighter.
What?
Have none of you seen that Kenny Starfighter swapping the colors to create an impossible Rubik's Cube?
No? Is that a meme?
But that's because Kenny
I've seen it,
Starfighter is OP.
definitely.
And I don't think
I
you should
mean,
take like life advice from Kenny Starfighter anyway.
Oh yeah, God no. You'll end up eating shampoo.
Oh, he does that? I thought he drank gasoline and stuff.
Probably does that as well. Wouldn't surprise me.
He's a hardcore man. Alright, so what were we doing before we went on extended break? Oh, I have a stream open here. Shut it down. Playing the game. What were we doing?
Made the grenade launcher work
Ah,
right.
yeah. Yeah,
And we're
okay,
gonna
yeah.
make a assault rifle.
Yes, so it's time to make the assault rifle, baby. So let's do that. So I'll make some new files. Doop doop doodle doo doo. Doop 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 yeah yeah. So I'll just go in here and I'll do a assault rifle. Rifle. Which which gun? Which type of gun is the spiciest one of all? Assault rifle. Because it's made of salt.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Approved.
Thanks. I don't have any friends. Anyway, so we just go on here to make our assault rifle. Look at that. So I'll make the head file. Doop 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 pragma once. Fuck. Doop 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 include. Includes. And I'll include. Whoops.
Do you know which weapon has the most shit and piss in it?
The most shit and piss in it.
Mm.
No?
A pee stool.
Oh, you son of a bitch, I hate you so much.
How
You
did this
fucking
become
piece
work?
of shit.
Perfect.
Oh, that's so good. Peace. Oh god. Oh, I'm gonna say that all the time now. Okay, so we gotta do weapon base,
Good.
and then assault rifle. Generated H, and then we'll make the class. New class. A assault rifle. Inherits from weapon base. Don't forget to generate your body. There we go. Cool. So, okay, so I'm gonna override fire here then. So I'm just gonna override fire right away. Oops. Like so. And then we will create the implementation. Now it works for some reason. So I'll include the header. Like so. So now we have an assault rifle, and we want that to just ray trace to hit some surface. We haven't talked about ray tracing at all, right? We've done sweeps like with like add actor offsets, but we haven't done any manual sweeping or tracing, right? Unless I remember incorrectly.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, we did the one like overlap check, but that's not really tracing. That's something else. So that's cool. So let's do that now. I'm just gonna close this because it's in the way. So the way you do that, I think, is I think it's in Kismet's system library. Kismet's system library. And then we have line trace. Okay, here we go. So here we have all of the line tracing functions. Could you guess the difference between single and multi?
Number of returning a single hit or returning a collection of all hits.
Yes. So it's single, it will trace until it hits something that's blocking. So in the case of, for example, if we go into Paint, if you know, here's our source, so we're just like tracing from here, and we're gonna trace like that. That's our tracing line. If we have like an overlap box here, so I'm just gonna draw an overlap box. So that's like a box trigger or something. And here we have a solid wall. And here we have a solid sphere or something. Ray trace single will return this hit here. This is what they will return. So it will do a line trace. This is overlapping, so it will not register that as a hit. It will only look for blocking hits. So it will register this entry point here. Will be its hit. So it'll get the normal from that point and so on. A multi-trace will actually register everything. So it will register this overlap here. And it will add it to a list. So it will say like, oh, we had a hit here. It was not a blocking hit, but it was a hit. So it will register this actor into its like output of hits. It will then register this one, and it will register this one. So it will just keep going. Even though it hits something blocking, it will keep tracing to find like the next blocking thing. And it will also include overlaps. So if you need to trace for overlaps, you gotta do multi. So that's cool. It's okay if you don't remember that, but I just want to give you a quick rundown of what the difference is. But we want to do a single, I think. I think single is going to work fine for us. So I'm just going to do a line trace single. And we have some options here. We have single, we have line trace single by profile. And then we have line trace single for objects.
I have a question about the line trace multi.
Yes?
I'm assuming, is that sorted by distance? Because I know in Unity Recast all is not.
I don't know. It might not be. Yeah, I would not depend on that. No, I would check the time because it will return a time, right? It will be like, oh, here's like 0.3 or something, and 0.6. It'll be like the distance, the normalized distance traveled. So I would sort them manually by that time. My guess is it won't be. That's what with my gut feeling at least.
Cool.
Cool. Right, so I think line trace single is what we want. And there's a couple of different ways we can do it. So we have line trace single. We have line trace single by profile. And we have line trace single by objects. So these are three different ways that we can do a line trace. The first one, the one that's just like line trace single and then nothing. This one will use something called a trace channel. Alright, so we haven't really talked about trace channels. We talked a little bit about object channels. If I just go into fuck player here, for example, and check the collision matrix, we can see there are two groups. There's trace responses here. I don't know if you can see this it's like grayed out. Let's just do this. Let's just do custom. Okay. We have trace responses here, and we have object responses. So remember that object types is something that we can set a collision body to be of that specific object type. So that's what an object type means. So one shape will be of one object, and the matrix defines which objects will collide with other objects. So object responses for stuff that's moving around in the world, and they can either collide or not collide. Then we have something called trace responses, and this is only for querying, okay? So an object cannot be of a trace type. Even though they're very similar, they're still just like, they're types in the same matrix. The only difference really is that objects cannot be of that type. Like here's visibility and camera. An object cannot be of a type camera or type visibility. These are only for querying. So for example, the camera will query, can I back up into this thing? So it will do a line trace backwards, Runtime Kernel. We need like a special type of camera to do that. But imagine if we had that type of camera that's like sort of moving backwards, called a spring arm, like in a third-person game. It will do a trace backwards to see, can I actually back up here to give a third-person perspective, or is there something in the way? And then we can define, does an object block the camera or does it not block the camera? And that's defined by that matrix. So, you know, for example, the player probably shouldn't block the camera, and right now it does, but, you know, we probably wouldn't want it to block the camera, so I'll probably set that ignore. You know, a bush maybe shouldn't block camera. A wall definitely should block camera, and we can define sort of, you know, those characteristics. Another one that's default is visibility, and that's, can you see through this thing? Usually that's used for AI and stuff. Like, you know, can the AI see the player through something? So one example where these are different is, for example, if we had like a glass wall. So imagine if we had like, you know, in the middle here, there's this giant glass wall that's covering, this splitting up this level into two sides. The camera should probably bump up against the wall. We don't want like the camera and player to be on different sides of that glass wall. We should probably have them be on the same. So I would set the glass wall to block camera traces. However, maybe we want the enemies on the other side of the glass wall to still see the player. Like, it's just glass, it doesn't block visibility, so they should be able to see us through the glass wall. So that's why it should block camera, but it shouldn't block visibility. And that's how you can sort of define these surfaces for querying, sort of depending on what you are querying. So that's what this line trace single does. You're querying with a specific line trace channel. So if you're doing AI, you would trace for visibility, for like checking if we can see the player. But for the camera, you would line trace single with the camera trace channel. And you'd get different results from those two, depending on these matrix. Does that kind of make sense? Kind of makes sense why this is useful. And for us, because I think this is we should probably use something like this. Let's go through the other ones just really quickly. They're not used as much. This is the one that's mostly used because it's the most useful one, and the one that's, you know, least easiest to tweak. But there are a few other ones that might be good to just like sort of touch on really quickly. They're not that different really. So we have by profile, and that takes an F name here. So here's an F name profile name, and it will just take an existing profile. So we might say like a pawn or a character mesh or something like that, and it will take its matrix and use that as a to check whether the line trace should hit something. So if we said like pawn, for example, okay, I'm going to use pawn. Let's take one that's not. I think everyone is like block everything. Yeah, no one is very interesting, unfortunately. Or let's say we have something more interesting. Let's say we have someone that looks like this or something. Yeah, something like that. So if we said we had a collision profile that looked like this, and we said, okay, I'm going to use that to line trace, then that means if it hits something that's world static, it will hit. If it hits something that's world dynamic, it will just ignore, go through. Pawn, it will hit. Physics body, it will miss. Vehicle will hit. And then destructible is overlap. So in that case, it will go through it, but if you're doing a multi-line trace, it will add it to the list as an overlap. So that's line trace by profile. That means you're sort of testing it with an object profile that you set up. So maybe if you want to like test, like, can the player go through this area here? Like, will the player be blocked by something? Then you would use, okay, I'm going to trace with the player's collision profile. Because then you're sort of like testing if the player would get through.
So the line trace by profile, does that not care about the like trace channel settings of the profile, or does it take that into account as well somehow?
No, it will not care about these trace responses because it will only check with the world. Since you're
Right.
doing a trace, you can't like check if two traces are hitting each other. That won't be
Right,
relevant.
yeah.
Yeah. So good question. Yes, it will only check the object responses. So that's great if you're doing collision solving and you wanna like, you know, sweep with a player to see like, oh, am I supposed to step up or something? Then you use sweep by profile with the player's profile. Very useful. Very cool. And then the last one is line trace. I think it was called like by objects or something. Line trace single. Yeah, for objects. Oh no. For objects, there it is. And this one takes an array of eObject type queries. And this is the one we actually sort of did before when we did the overlap check. This one will line trace, and it will only take these objects that we put in up for consideration. So we can say, okay, I want to line trace, but I only want to see world static, world dynamic, and pawns. Like those are the only three I care about. Don't care about these three. Then we could use line trace single for objects, so we find only a specific type of objects. Sometimes used, not very. Sometimes used for stuff like finding the ground. Like I want to find if I'm standing on something, then you could do a line trace single for objects, just downwards, with only like world static and world dynamic, just to find like something that I can stand on. I don't care about actors, I don't care about anything like that. I only want to find like grounds. Actors and move, that is, I want to find like ground stuff. Sometimes used, not very often. Do you feel like you have some vague understanding of what the difference is by these three and why there are three different? Doesn't have to be crystal clear. Just like, okay, store it in like the back of your head, so later when you do line traces, you can look it up again. Cool. I feel like line trace single is the one we want to use. We want to do like a line trace. We could do visibility, I guess, but mostly we might want to make actually a new one that is like weapon trace or something. So we might want to say like, okay, glass door should block it, a bush should not block it, and we can like sort of define that ourselves and don't have to rely on this visibility and camera responses to make sure those are consistent. For example, I would this capsule here, I would set that to not block. It would ignore both of these for me. Like I don't think this capsule should block visibility, and it should not block the camera either. But we wanted to block bullets, so that's why it kind of makes sense to have our own trace response for that. So I'm just gonna set this back to be pawn. So let's do that. Let's make our own trace response then for weapons. So I will go into settings, project settings, and collision. So here we can make new objects and we can make new trace channels. So here we can define those ups, and then we can also make new presets if we want to. Here's just the one that exists. We can remove these if we want to. These are like the default Unreal presets we can make our own. So I'm just gonna make a new trace channel, and I'll call it weapon. And then we're gonna set the default response. So this like if you make a new collision profile or a new collision preset, I mean a new matrix, or the ones that exist. When it adds this weapon entry, what is the default response going to be? Is every object by default going to ignore weapon, or is it got by default block the weapon? And we want it to default block the weapon. So we want to see... Actually, let's do ignore. I think that's safer. So we're going to say, like, for every collision preset right now, just ignore weapon. So right now, the weapon traits will hit nothing. And then we'll individually go in and set, okay, what do we actually want to hit with the weapon? So now we've made a trace channel, so we can go into our fuck player here, for example, and see. Okay, so now we have this in trace responses. There's this new weapon entry here. That's ignore. So by now we will not hit anything with our weapon. But I'm gonna go in and say like, okay, so block all. That should block weapon, I think, because it block all. So I'm just gonna go double click this block all preset here. and set that to block weapon. So now everything in the game that has block all set as its profile will block weapon. Overlap all, it should overlap. Block all dynamic, it should block. Overlap all dynamic, should overlap. Let's do a few more. Don't care about these. Let's do pawn. Yeah, pawn should probably block. Spectator character mesh. Nah, we don't care. Physics actor. Yeah, physics actor, sure. I think that's good. I think that should be fine. This should cover most of the ones we have. And if we're seeing that we're missing something, we'll just go in and fix it. There we go. So now we've done that. Now let's actually do the trace and see what happens. So we're gonna line trace single. And let's see what the parameters are. So we have the world context object. What should I put in here? Do you guys remember?
Was it get world?
We could do get world, but we could do something simpler as well.
Can you just write this?
Yes, this. You just need to provide an object that is inside of a world. And this is an actor, so it's going to be inside of something, some level. So we can just provide this, and that would be sufficient for it to suffice, or to surmise, I guess is the word I'm looking for, the worlds to do the tracing. Then we have start and end. So that's going to be the start point and the end point of our trace. And I think it makes sense to start from the camera. Like, this is sort of like a, like, how do you do a trace? Would it be from the barrel? That would be like the naive thing to do from the barrel of the gun to where we're looking with the camera. And we certainly could do that. It will be a little bit tricky to do that mathematically, but we could do that. But we generally, what you want to do if you're modeling of a game like Counter-Strike or something, is that you want to trace from the camera center forwards some distance. So where the crosshair is, which is going to be in the middle of the screen, that's where we want to hit. So I'm going to trace from the camera forwards some arbitrary distance forwards. So I'm actually going to fetch the camera transform again. That's going to be helpful. So I'm just going to get F transform cam transform. So that's going to be equal to player owner. I think that was the name. Camera get component transform. I'm scared that I'm not getting any. Was it owner player? It might have been owner player. Let's compile and see what happens. I mean, it's gonna scream, but I want to see what it screams. No prefix or invalid identifier for base class weapon base. Oh, whoops. A weapon base. There we go. Oopsie poopsie. Okay, let's see now. I sleep. Ah, okay, cool. So it worked. It was just that I don't have fuck player included. All right, but otherwise it seems like it works fine. So I am going to include the player first of all. Let's see. Fuck player. Fuck player. Whoops. There it is. Okay, cool. Right. Okay. So, what's our start point gonna be? Well, our start point is gonna be the cam transform get location. Then our endpoint, I'm actually going to make these variables. It's going to be a little bit easier to read. There's so many fucking inputs to line trace single. I hate this function. it's like, please make it a struct. But I'm going to save the start just to save ourselves a little bit of sanity. So I'm going to make a start variable, and I'm going to set that to be cam transform get location. And then I'm going to make a end. And that's going to be start plus cam transform. Oops. Get rotation. Oh my god. Get forward vector times some arbitrary length. So let's say with trace, I don't know, 20,000 units or something. Like so. So we're getting the rotation of the transform, getting the forward vector from that, and then we're timesing that by 20,000. And that's going to be our end point. So the start plus that. If you just if you just do this, so now start plus, I hope this makes you wince that this trace is not really gonna do what you think it's gonna do. I'll let you explore that on your own, why that does not work. You have to do start plus. It has happened at Hazelight many times that I've debugged a line trace, and that's the problem. So forget your, or remember your ends. So an offset is an end point. Start, oh god. Start, end. Alright, next one. Trace channel. Can I please type this? Trace type query. I don't think I can select it by name. Alright, we might have to... Alright, we're gonna have to make a blueprint version, and we're gonna have to set it as U property. Sucks, but I can't think of a better way to do it right now. So I'm gonna make a edit defaults only. What was it called? Trace type query. So since we made our own type, and I don't even think you can select the Unreal types, we want to be able to select which trace type to use in our trace. And since I don't have easy access to that in code, unfortunately I don't have easy access to that in code, we're gonna have to make a U property just to set it from Blueprint, just like we did before with the array of object types. So we're gonna set that in assault rifle, and we'll do trace type, like so. So I'll do the trace type. So let's set that here. All right, and then we have trace complex, and trace complex means for stuff like meshes and stuff, meshes, scala meshes and stuff, they all have two different collision shapes. They have one that's simple and one that's complex. So the simplified one is usually like it's only boxes and spheres, or it's a very, very small complex convex shape, I mean. While the complex one, I mean, not surprisingly, that's just more complicated. It has more shapes in it. It has more boxes or spheres or whatever, and usually a lot of like very fit in convex shapes, you know, around the fingers and stuff like that if it's a scale mesh. So this bool is just if you want to trace against the complex ones or the simple ones. Almost always you want to set this as false. I almost said it as true, but yeah, you almost always you want to trace with the simple shapes. It's good enough for almost everything. I can't think of a good. I can't remember like a good point in It Takes Two or where we did trace complex. I can't think of one. I think we actually I think we disabled this actually. I think we actually went in to line trace and but like, no, you cannot set this to true. It's false always. For performance reasons. Don't remember though. And here we have an array of actors to ignore. So this is one if you want to ignore a certain, you know, some actors. Let's just do an empty array for now. So I'll just do array of let's see, of actors. We will probably come into a good case for why we don't want to leave this empty very soon. But for now, I'm just gonna have an empty array there. So I'm not gonna ignore any actors. Then we have okay. So here's draw debug type, and this is if we want to draw the if we want to draw this line trace, and we do. So I'm just gonna do for duration. So you have a few of them. You have oh shit. You have a few different options for which type of debug drawing you want to do. God, Visual Studio is so slow. God damn it. A second. There we go. Okay, they showed up. So we have for duration, we have for one frame, we have none, and we have persistent. So none, I think, makes sense. It's like don't debug draw at all. You just do the trace and give me the result and nothing else. We have for one frame, and that's it will draw it this frame only. So it will draw like the debug data for this trace for only one frame. So that's useful if you're doing a trace every frame. Then you probably only want to see it for one frame as well. Then for duration, and that will take this draw time here. So there's a float at the end. So it will draw it for that amount of time. So it's 5 by default. So for duration, we'll just do, okay, it will draw for 5 seconds. That's nice. That's probably what we want to do here because we're firing individual shots, not every frame, which means we probably want to have some time to see the debug draw. So I'll do for duration. And then we have persistent, which I think is forever. I'm not sure. I've actually never used this, but I think persistent means it will draw it forever. So, you know, that's cool if you want to do that. I've never done it before. So for this type of trace where we're doing it every time you click the left button, we probably want to do for duration so we have some time to look at it. And then finally, no, there's 2 left. Okay, we have two parameters left. I hate this function so much. It's an f hit result reference out hit. So this is the actual hit result that's gonna be generated by the trace. This is the most important one. So I will just make an f hit result variable. Hit. And I will feed that as a reference into the function. So I just type it. Let's type hit. And then now, okay, we're finally done. This is the last one. Ignore self. And that's if the trace is gonna ignore the actor that's calling the trace. Actually, I'm not sure how it figures out which actor is calling it. I think it's the world context object. I'm pretty sure it's the world context object it uses to figure out which actor is calling the trace. But yeah, so if we want to ignore ourselves, we don't really care. Assault rifle, it doesn't have any collision, but it's good practice to set this as true. Almost always we want to ignore self, so I'm just gonna set that to true. And we're done. Okay, so that's finally we're done. That's the line trace. I hate this function so much. Please, if they use meta struct, it will be so easier. I hate like we have a struct for this that you can feed in stuff one thing at a time. It makes it so much easier to use. But we got through it. So I'm gonna save.
Do you think we could pass in the player owner instead of this to make the ignore self work?
We could maybe, yeah. We could try that. Let's see what happens now then. But that's a really good idea actually. Never thought about that. Okay, so okay. So first of all, I gotta switch the gun, I think, because we're still using the grenade launcher. So I'm gonna switch it out. So instead of the grenade launcher, we're gonna use the assault rifle. That's not the right one. Here we go. I gotta compile. Whoops. Oopsie daisy. Uh-oh. Assault rifle H. You cannot use a raw enum name as a type for a member variables. Instead, use ts enum as bytes. Crap. All right. So for the property, we cannot use just the raw enum. We have to do T enum as byte. Probably for performance reasons. They want to force everyone to use the enum as a byte. So it's more cheaper on size. Cool. We failed. Use of undefined type uCamera components. Also, uKismet system library is not included, so we gotta include that as well. So I will include, let's see, the camera components, and also include Kismet's. I think that's it. Kismet system library. Yes. Okay. There we go. Include those. Maybe, baby. It might just work. It worked. Okay, so let's see what happens. All right, I gotta select the gun. Assault rifle. So nervous. See if I walk around and then I left click. Da 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 da. It worked. So when I left click, I think it's using the default trace. I wasn't expecting it to work, but I guess it is using the default visibility trace channel. Why is it? Oh, the camera! Oh, I was like, why is the camera doing this? Do you see, like, when I'm rotating around, like, I'm not moving, but it's like panning around, like third-person style. And it's because I forgot to reset. I was like moving it around to make an example, and then I forgot to reset it. Let's bring it back. There we go. I was so confused. Okay, there we go. So you can see that if I shoot something and I'm looking dead at it, I cannot see a line. It just looks like a point, right? And that's a good thing, because that's the trace we wanted to do. We wanted to trace from the camera straight forwards, which means that whatever I'm looking at it with my crosshair that we haven't added yet, whatever I'm looking at, that's what should be hit. So that's why we cannot see the line. We're looking directly at the line. It's only when I sort of strafe around that I see that it's actually a line going forwards. So the debug draw will draw the line, and it goes, red if it hits something, and it will set a little point at the point that we hit. So that's very nice. But it will also keep drawing green for the rest of the line trace. You can sort of see how long was the line trace, what did we miss, and so on. So that's a cool, pretty nice debug draw feature. But yeah, we can clearly see that we are hitting stuff. These fucking guys are wrecking everything. But let's set it so we are using the appropriate trace channel. So I'm gonna override it in Blueprint. So do assault rifle. Override it. Assault rifle. There we go. And I'm gonna set the trace type. Yeah, we can see here the default was actually visibility, so that's the one it was using. We don't want to use that. We want to use weapon, because we are using custom trace options for that. There we go. And then I go into player and change it to be the BP version of assault rifle. So now, okay, so now we're seeing a bit of a more interesting result. Now it doesn't seem to hit anything at first, like it's just green, which means that it seems like it's just going through here. But we actually look a little closer, there's a red dot right there. So it's like a red dot right at, the beginning of the ray. So this is kind of the result I wanted to happen. Can anyone guess why we're getting red dots at the beginning of our trace? And I will tell you, it means there's a hit there. So there is a hit right at the beginning.
I'm guessing we're hitting the player, right?
Yes. So this is why we wanted. Yeah, we're hitting ourselves. So that's just why I wanted a custom trace channel, because the trace channel visibility is not hitting the player, it's not hitting the player's capsule, which we want. We want weapons to hit the player's capsule. However, we don't want this trace to hit the player's capsule. This trace should ignore it because we're the one shooting. And this is why the B ignore self is such a ready available bool, because this is the behavior you almost always want. When you're doing a trace from an actor, you want to ignore the actor itself. And we had the great suggestion: what if we set the this here, the world context object? What if we set that to be the player? Because then it will be like, okay, the player is the one doing the trace, even though it's coming from another actor. It's kind of like, the player doing the trace. So let's try it. I've never tried it, so let's see what happens. I'm very curious to see what's gonna happen. Okay. So now if I shoot... it does work. Okay, fantastic. That's awesome. So yeah, we're setting the player as the world context object, which I'm assuming now that that's what it's using to figure out which actor is actually shooting the ray. And then with ignore self, that's what it's going to use to figure out which actor should we ignore by default. The other way to solve this problem would be to add the player to this array here, this ignore actor array. If you remember, I left that empty. But that's what we also could have used to feed in the player so that the line trace would ignore the player because it is in this ignore actor array. So that's the other way we could have solved that problem. Any questions about this? No? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna have a vote, a little quick vote here. Do you guys want some hit results to be like, maybe we spawn like a particle effect or something at the thing we're hitting, or do you want the crosshair?
Why?
I want the particle effect on the head.
Okay, that's one for particle.
I would like to see a crosshair.
Crosshair?
same.
Same.
Okay.
Spawning particle effects, we've already sort of seen how to do it.
I guess.
That's a good point. All right, just because we got a more J's for, I think both would be interesting. But yeah, let's do widgets. I think that's a good idea. So how does one do widgets? So I'm actually gonna in Bloopers here, I'm gonna make a new folder just for widgets. With widgets. So the way you do widgets is that you go in here, either you go from Blueprint class and go to something called a user widget. You can either do that to create a user widget, or use right-click user interface, and then we have widget blueprint here. So both are fine. So I'm just gonna go into here and do user interface widget blueprint. The way I usually call them is VBP, so widget blueprints. Usually the naming convention I like, and I call it crosshair. So VBP underscore crosshair. So this is a special type of blueprints that will open up this special widget editor. So it's called a designer. So it has two modes. It has the designer, where we're placing out widgets. We can place out images, checkboxes, text boxes, sliders, whatever we want to put in. That's where we design our widgets, and you can see that they're entered into this hierarchy here. We're going to talk about more in a bit. And then we have the graph. Then we switch to graph mode, and here's where we do the coding for the widget. What it's going to do, stuff going to move, reacting to slider inputs, reacting to button inputs, reacting to the world. Everything of that's going to be happening here. So we have the designer, putting stuff out, graph, coding, making stuff work. Widgets are almost made in Blueprints. with AngelScript, it's possible to do them. It's probably possible in C++ as well. You can just inherit from user widgets. We can probably try that as well at some point to make sort of the code of the widget happen in code. However, the designer only works in Blueprints. So you're always going to have to make a VBP anyways, just to place out the widget and so on. However, we want to make one super easy, so I'm just going to remove all of the things I've done. I immediately regret my little experiment. By default, there's a canvas panel here. That's a type of widget. It's a widget that contains children, sometimes called a panel widget. There's a bunch of those. There's like list widgets, and there's scroll bar widgets and stuff that contains other widgets. It doesn't have any visuals on its own. It just contains stuff. That's one by default. I think this is very similar to how it works in Unity, right? I think by default you have to have a canvas, if I remember correctly, in Unity. I have worked very little with UI in Unity. You could remove this and have something else. Maybe we want to have just like only a button, and then like the button instead takes up the whole screen. If we wanted to. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes not. In this case, we want to put something in the middle of the screen, and I think then the canvas is actually a pretty good contender for that. So I'm just gonna add a canvas, and then I'll add a. Guess we can add an image. Maybe there's a good image for a crosshair. So I'm gonna add image here. So I'm gonna search in the palette. Search in the palette for an image widget. I'm gonna drag that in here. So now I've added an image to our canvas. So let's find a good image. I'm gonna go into appearance here. I'm gonna select the button, the image. I'm gonna name that something else. I'm gonna name it crosshair. I'm gonna select our crosshair image widget. Going to the right here, we have appearance. Here's all the settings for that widget. Going to brush in appearance, and here we can select the image to use. So I'm gonna open it up, and I don't know, let's see if we can find something. Anchor looks kind of good. Looks kind of like a thing. Bad. Oh, bad. Ooh, not good. I don't like that one. Base color. Okay, that was not good. We can probably go around. We can select any material really, but it will give us an error if it's not that material that it sort of is expecting to be in a widget. So if I type circle, maybe. No. Crosshair? Cross. That's not. I don't know what I want. Dots maybe.
Comic Sans
Is that good? No. I don't know. We could probably find something. Let's go with the. Yeah, let's just go with the cross. Whatever it is, looks great. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Programmer art, let's go.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. All right, so we can have this here. So we can probably put it in the middle here. As a canvas is where you can put something anywhere. Like there's no constraints. You can move it around. You can size it like this. This is all properties of a canvas panel. Being able to move stuff around, scale it as you want. You can rotate it as well. That's what the canvas panel allows you to do. Its children can be anywhere. If we didn't have a canvas panel, if we had a list or something that we might use later, then there are other constraints that you put on the widgets. You cannot move them around freely anymore. But in this case, it makes sense. We want to put it in the middle here. So we could just like eyeball it, right? Or like maybe go in here into position and maybe put in some arbitrary values for how to put it in the middle. Or we can set it anchor. So that's going to be essentially its origin. Like what is the origin of this widget? And we can put that in the middle. So now you can see this point here moved in. And that means the origin of the widget is going to be in the middle of this canvas panel. So if the canvas panel would rescale, it would like size up and down. That would be a problem if we did not use the origin in the middle, because it will origin will be in the top left here. So its arbitrary position here is gonna not all of a sudden it's not gonna sync up anymore. It's gonna, if this canvas gets smaller, then this thing is gonna move to the right or move over to the left or something. It's not gonna be centered anymore. But with the anchor in the middle, we can make sure that that's never gonna happen. The anchor in the middle is always gonna be in the middle. So if we just align it with that, we're gonna be fine. So now if I reset the position, now I have position 0, 0. That's pretty satisfying. it's kind of in the middle. Its left corner is in the middle. So that's closer, but not really what we want. And that's the alignment we want to change in that case. So the alignment means which corner of this widget is going to actually align with the origin. So right now it's 0, 0, and that's the top left corner of the widget. And if I put this as 1, hit F1. If I put this as 1, 1, then it's the bottom right corner that's going to be aligning with the origin. We want the middle, so we're just going to type 0.5, 0.5. So now the middle of our widget is being aligned with the origin of the canvas, or whatever anchor we selected for it. I'm also gonna scale it down because we made it quite big. So I'm just gonna do like maybe, I don't know how big is the crosshair gonna be, 5 by 5 maybe, or 2 by 2. That's a little bit small. Let's do 5 by 5. That's a teeny tiny cross. Okay, let's maybe a little bit bigger, maybe 10. That looks fine to me. Yeah, 10 by 10 is fine. Alright, and I think we're essentially done. I don't think we actually need to do anything more for the crosshair. We just want it to be in the middle. It's not supposed to have any behavior right now. Maybe later on, like if you're aiming at something, maybe it pulsates or something or changes color. And that's stuff what we would code in the graph in that case. But right now, I'm fine with it being a fucking ugly ass little cross here. And it doesn't do anything. It just sort of is there. So I'm gonna be satisfied with that. I'm gonna compile and save and just close it down. So how do we add it to the screen? Well, we can add it from anywhere, but I think one good way is to do in the fuck player actually. I'm going to go into the event graph here, go into begin play. I'm gonna be a good citizen and add a parent call, just because that's always good to do. And then I'm gonna call a function called add create widget. So this magical function will take a widget class and construct it for us. And here, very conveniently, our VBP crosshair is. So I'm just gonna click that. So that's gonna construct a crosshair widget for us. We can also optionally add a player controller here. So we could probably do like get controller. Yeah. Okay, it didn't get ours, but whatever. If we wanted to, we don't really need to. I think it's maybe useful for getting input. Actually, I'm pretty sure actually that it is. We need it for getting input. So maybe it would be better to do this in the player controller actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, let's do it. Actually, yeah, let's be good citizens. Let's do this in the player controller. It was a long time since I actually added widgets. I'm gonna make a blueprint version of the player controller in that case. I'll just go into blueprints. Yeah, player controller here. BP underscore player controller.
But that widget, create crosshair widget VIP, that was a magical thing that already existed, right?
Yes, it already existed.
Okay, so what does it give you? Like what's magical about it? Like what does it? If I wanted to make another UI element that wasn't a crosshair,
yeah,
how would I go about doing that?
Well, it's the same thing. It's nothing magical relating to the crosshair. It's just that the widget system is super fucking complicated, and that function is hiding a lot of things from you. Actually, adding a widget is quite annoying, but it's fine. We'll find out what this means. Oh, there's a
and the
camera
widget is UI element, I guess.
Yes. Okay, cool. Mostly. Yes, asterisk. So I made a BP player controller just because I think Unreal really wants us to do widgets from a player controller if we're using its default system. So I'm just gonna, in the begin play of the player controller here, I'm gonna create the widgets. So I'm just gonna create widgets. I'll do VBP crosshair owning player. In that case, it's just gonna be self. So it's the player controller that owns these widgets, and that's for receiving input, I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure, because input and widgets is weird. We'll look at it sometime, probably, but I'm just going to do this for now. And then this return value is the VBP crosshair widget. So it's a reference to that object. So if we have stuff like, variables or functions or stuff that we define in the graph here, if we added variables, added functions, we could call those from this reference here. So in here, we could call functions or set variables if we wanted to, if that's, relevant for the widgets to perform. So let's play. And there's nothing there. Because we've forgotten two things, actually. The first thing we've forgotten is that we haven't set this new player controller as the player controller to use in our game mode. Remember, because the game mode defines all of these default classes to use for its game. So we have to go into our game mode and actually set that. So here, player controller is used using default, but we're going to use the BP here. Okay, so now it's using the BP player controller. I can see that because up here we can definitely see BP underscore player controller has been spawned. So that is the one it's using, but it's still not working. And that's because we've forgotten one thing more, and that's you can create widgets individually without actually adding them to the screen. You can sort of create a widget and have it for some reason. But we want to add it to the screen, and then we have to, from this, do add to viewport. There we go. So now it's actually being added to the screen. So now, whoops. Excuse me. So now if we play, yay! Clap. Clap, please. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a game developer, by the way. Yeah, you can clearly see how I made a masterpiece like It Takes Two. I'm pretty good at Unreal and UI design in general. So now we have a little teeny tiny. Let's make it a little bit bigger because it's actually quite small. Let's go to 32. There we go. There, okay, so now a little bit bigger. So now we have a crosshair in the middle of a screen that we can use to aim. Very cool. Alright, any questions on that? I know we haven't really gotten deep into widgets or anything, but at least we got like a touch into the widget system and how that works. We'll be looking way more into that with like health bars and stuff like that we're gonna be doing soon. So that's gonna be fun.
I missed a part. Exactly where did you create the connection to the player blueprint?
In the player controller. So the player blueprint actually didn't hit at all. I touched it first, and then I realized it was in the wrong place. So it's removed everything. So the player actor has not been changed at all. It's only the player controller where I've gone in and added some code to actually spawn the widgets.
Okay, because I think I missed something that made it under.
I made a new player controller here in the player.
Yeah, I did that as well. Created there, add to viewport.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that looks correct. But I think I missed something that probably came after that.
Did you go into game mode and change the?
Ah, there we go.
Yeah. Defaults. I don't know what HUD is for. HUD does something. I don't know what HUD does. I think it's supposed to be like a. I think HUD is supposed to be like a controller of all widgets or something.
I did. When I did the crosshair, I did it through the HUD. I made a fuck HUD.
Yeah.
As a class in code and just had. So that's like the current player interface that you see on screen.
Oh.
It's the way I understood it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that's easier then. But yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure because I had trouble. Like I wanted to draw then the damage on the canvas, for example, and I couldn't do that on the HUD because it was hard to access the correct player's HUD.
Oh.
So I don't know. Maybe widgets. Well, it seems like a more generic and easier approach.
Yeah, I've never used HUDs, and I think adding widgets is usually easier, anyways. So
yeah, this seems to be more customization because I like I did it in code, so it was just take this frame and stick it in the center of the viewport. So it's a big red dot. But yeah, at least that's what I think it's for, basically.
Yeah, it's probably useful. It's probably good, but I've never used it. All right, guys, I'm dying of hunger.
Just a quick question. What is the parent begin play? I'm assuming that is called the super begin play.
Yes, that's super,
cool.
super big and play. Did I fucking record? Oh, I did. Thank God I recorded. I was like, did I forget? I would have died. All right, cool. All right, any last questions? Thoughts? Worries? What are you scared of? What is like your biggest fear? Sharks?
Projectile weapons.
That's the joke. That's gonna end this stream.
Projectile.
Yeah, that's the perfect joke to end the day. I hope you guys have a.
You don't want a pea stool in your face.
That is true.
Oh, dude, you brought it back. Call and response, fucking good
I
gags.
honestly thought that the answer to that was going to be scare gun.
Scare gun.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't get it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Sorry, it's been a bit of a chaos week. I've been in bed, but I'm back up again. I'm back alive. I got some fight in me. So next week we're gonna continue off where we were and hopefully get somewhere. So
Sounds awesome. I'm glad you're back.
yeah,
Indeed. Sounds epic.
hell yeah. All right, guys. See you around. Bye
See you.
bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.